The moment my husband learned I betrayed him with his best friend, everything fell apart.
Hey Redditors, long-time lurker but first-time poster. I've always been a huge fan of Reddit, and it has always been one of my favorite social media, but I never expected that one day I'd be here in Reddit posting and asking for advice. I guess life isn't always what you expect. I am currently in such a shitty position, I don't even know what to do. I am distraught. I am hoping that by posting here, I'll get reasonable advice on what to do next, or some semblance of peace, since I've always been told that talking about your problems helps them. I cheated on my husband with his best friend, and I currently do not know how to go about appeasing him. I am in such a bad place. I know what I did was wrong, but for the sake of our marriage, I need him to forgive me. If my husband doesn't not forgive me, then I am literally ruined. I know you're probably wondering what happened, so backstory first. I am Arya, a 28 female, and my husband Jimin, a 29 male, have been married for 2 years, and we live in California in the United States of America. We met at a summer music festival. We both liked the same indie band playing on the main stage, so we ended up dancing together in the crowd. We connected, and I even remember joking that he shared a name with the popular singer Jimin from BTS, which made him laugh. It was as if something clicked between us. We shared dreams and made promises, and Jimin became my rock. He was such a sweet and caring guy and didn't care that I was so out of his league. For context, so you understand where I'm coming from, my husband Jimin is a chaebol. For those that don't know what a chaebol is a very large South Korean family-owned conglomerate, so basically large families-owned companies. The kids of those families are called chaebols, and they are called this because they are very rich. And I don't mean regular rich, I mean the 1% rich, the top untouchable rich. These few families are like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates of South Korea. And that's the kind of family my husband came from. I, on the other hand, grew up on the bad side of town in the US and lived on food stamps. So yes, me and my husband came from 2 different worlds. I was so surprised when he proposed to me within a year of dating and then introduced me to his family. Of course, his family did not like me. To them, I was from the wrong race, wrong nationality, and poor. What could their son want from me? Chaebols have a strict rule of marrying from other influential families, so they couldn't believe my husband wanted me. Trust me, it was something that stunned me, lol. I had always thought stuff like this only existed in. So I was really surprised to find out the power hierarchy. Stuff was real. My husband had to give me a quick rerun of everything to know about chaebols and Korea and stuff to do and not do. So it was really disheartening when they didn't like me. They said I was a gold digger and tried to convince my husband, but of course my husband didn't listen. And in a few months we were married. To quell my husband's family's fear, I suggested signing a prenup. And even though my husband disagreed, he finally caved in when I insisted and made me sign a prenup. The marriage went smoothly. It was a very small wedding at a small church, and we invited just a few friends and family members. I didn't want something large because I hated being around crowds, and he respected that. I remember telling him the words, "I do." To be honest, I was scared of getting married because I didn't want it to hold me down. But eventually I summoned up the courage because I loved my husband. Like I said before, my husband was from a very rich family. In fact, he was the next in line heir to be CEO until he stepped down for his younger brother. I remember it caused a huge falling out in his family because my husband was my father-in-law's choice to be CEO. My father-in-law could not understand why my husband would turn down being CEO, but my husband said he didn't really want the stress that came with that, plus the fact that we would have to move back to South Korea and have to travel a lot. He just didn't want that stress. So my husband became a bit of a part-time teacher. He only went to work on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, so Wednesdays and Thursdays were his days off during the weekdays. While it was hilarious, I know you're probably shocked. I found it hilarious too. My husband was a second-generation heir to one of the biggest countries in South Korea. So how does one go from that to becoming a common part-time teacher? But the thing is, my husband has always been humble, and it didn't really bother him. He didn't care what his status was and didn't want to be bored at home, so he took the job. That didn't stop his family from mocking him, lol. They mocked him for weeks as they found it hilarious and insulting to their family name. Because of my husband's family's wealth, I also didn't need to work, but I didn't want to be a stay-at-home wife, as I thought that would be too boring. so I decided to pursue my passion, which was hairstyling. I was very good at it and decided to operate my own store, which Jimin bought for me. Within a few weeks of opening my store, I decided I needed to get serious. And I mean serious. I was seriously making money there because I was really good at hairstyling, and I didn't have much competition, so I decided to give my store an upgrade. Of course, Jimin had no qualms giving me money for that. I had a full-on remake of my store and got a receptionist and some other hairstylists, so it wouldn't just be me in the store, and we'd attend to customers quicker. And within months, I knew I made the right decision. Business was booming, so I hired even more stylists. I was now more management and less hands-on at the job because I had a lot of stylists working for me. One day, someone came into the store to look for me. He didn't have an appointment and didn't sound like someone I knew at all, but I wasn't busy, so I told the receptionist to let him in. The moment he came in, I was surprised. He was really handsome, and I mean it. My husband, Jimin, is very handsome, tall, pale skin, and long hair, but there was something about this guy that just really drew me in like a forbidden fruit. He introduced himself and told me his name was Minjun, but that I could call him by his English name, Michael. He was Korean, just like my husband. It was something I thought was interesting at that moment, but didn't give much thought to it until I later found out he was my husband's best friend. He said he was looking for a job as a hairstylist. I was honestly taken aback at first because nothing about this guy screamed stylist, but I had always learned to never judge a book by its cover, so I decided to give him a chance. I let him try his hands on a dummy, and I was astounded. He was good, like really good, amazing even. I wasn't really looking for a stylist then because I had enough stylists at the store, but Michael's skills were just too good to pass on, so I employed him. He fit in like a perfect glove. Everybody loved Michiel. He was funny, handsome, charming. In fact, he was perfect. The customers loved him because he was exceptionally skilled and really handsome. In fact, a lot of them would refuse to be worked on by any stylist except Michiel Lol. Some would even wait till he was free, if they came and he was busy. The other co-workers, stylists, on the other hand, loved him because he was so handsome, nice, and patient with them, even the ones that weren't officially stylists but were going through training or something. Few months in, though, and I realized there was something about Michael. He was just different. Michael had a lot of passion for the job, but it was obvious he had never worked a day in his life before, at least to me. As someone who grew up in the slums and lived on food stamps, it was pretty easy to pick out a person that had never known suffering in his life, and Michiel was that person. He did not carry himself like someone that needed to work. He carried himself like someone that wanted to work. And I know you might be wondering, oh, what do you mean by that? You don't know what you're saying. But just hear me out. There's a certain way that a person carries themselves that you just know that they're different. Yeah, I'm guessing I noticed it because Michael carried himself the same way my husband carries himself, like he was on a whole different level from everybody. No, they weren't proud. My husband was definitely the most humble and kindest person I knew, and Michiel too was definitely not proud, but they were just different. They stood out from the crowd in a good way. It was something I also mentioned to my husband after our first date, about how the way he carried himself was different. My husband was amused LOL, but told me that chaebols were usually taught to be well-rounded in all areas from birth, and maybe it was that. Besides, those weren't the only things I noticed about Michiel. I also noticed the kind of clothes he wore. They were very expensive, lol, and also the cars he drove. Everyone in the store thought Michiel didn't have a car. But what they didn't know was that he actually had a driver that always dropped him a few blocks away from the store in the morning and waited right at that spot to pick him up when he closed. I had only noticed it by chance when I came very early to work a few times. Michiel was always very early to work. In fact, he was usually the first to arrive, and usually also the last to leave. I had noticed that it was the same person every time, so it couldn't be an Uber. And also, the cars the driver drove were very expensive. Initially, I had thought that maybe the driver was Michael's boyfriend or husband, but I had to dismiss that train of thoughts, because Michael himself one time during discussions in the store admitted that he was straight and single, and also, I noticed the interactions between the driver and Michiel were too sparsy and dry for them to be together. I know this sounds like I'm invested in Michiel lol, but I was actually intrigued. He was like a puzzle, difficult to unravel. In fact, he was an enigma, if you would call him that. During all these puzzling, Michael and I started to grow closer. We had a lot in common. We both loved hairstyling, and we were very good at it. We loved movies and art, and we had a ton of other stuff that we had in common. I am naturally a very introverted and shy person, but Michael just made speaking easy and effortless. With him, I felt like I could truly be myself. Maybe that should have been the first red flag in my head, but back then, I just didn't care. I had always grown up thinking people didn't like me and even had some abandonment issues. So when someone very attractive, apart from my husband, started showing me attention, I gobbled it up. One day, I remember it being a Wednesday. I had forgotten my laptop at home, and since it was my husband's day off, he brought it to the store for me. The receptionist and everyone knows him there, so he doesn't get stopped at the receptionist's desk or anything. So imagine my surprise when I, in my office, heard my husband happily say someone's name like Minjun Wo. At first, I wondered who Minjun was and if he was a customer before remembering that Mikhail was Minjun, and he had told me that when he came to apply for a job. I got up from my desk and went to look because I was curious. There was my husband hugging Mikhail, so they knew each other, and from the way they were hugging, they seemed pretty close. We went into my office so as not to cause a ruckus for customers getting their hair done, and my husband then introduced Michelle as his best friend and a chi-bol, and that was when it clicked. Now I knew why I was so curious about him, why I was so intrigued. He was a chi-bol. His family was very rich. That was when I realized why I thought he was so similar to my husband. At first I was stunned, then amused. Why was someone from a family that owned one of the biggest companies in South Korea working as a stylist in my store? Lol. Of course I questioned Michiel about it, to which he told me he had been bored and had always liked styling hairs, hence why he applied. He was also trying to show his family that hairstyling wasn't a fool's errand, hence why he was working. His family held the belief that hairstyling wasn't something he should bother himself with, since he would inherit the company someday, but he had always loved hairstyling. I also found out from my husband that Michael was currently in America because he was refusing to go back home to Korea. I also questioned another thing. Why wasn't Michael at our wedding? My husband said Michelle was his best friend, but he had never told me about him, nor did I see him at the wedding. My husband, however, explained that that was because he and Michelle had been going through a rough patch then and weren't in touch. Remember the rules I told you guys about chibols marrying other chibols and influential families? Well, apparently everyone had assumed lol, even though they weren't dating, that my husband would marry Michael's sister to merge the two families together because they were so similar in status and that it would be good for business. So they were appalled when my husband had brought me along and said he was going to marry me. Hence, another reason why they didn't approve of our marriage. Also, Michael's sister had a crush on my husband, so she was really crushed that my husband had married someone else. And that's why Mikhail had gotten angry at my husband, and they had a falling out until a few months ago when Mikhail finally reached out and apologized. I was really stunned and also questioned about why my husband didn't tell me about it. But my husband said during that time, he didn't think it was necessary, and the thing really put him in a bad mood. Then, so he didn't want to talk about it, I kind of understood him as I can really relate to not wanting to talk about something that brings bad memories, and I let it go. But it really brought us closer. Michael told me all about the embarrassing things my husband did in childhood, Lowell, and all the things I didn't know about him. My husband is not a secretive person by any means and is very open with me, but Michael has known him since childhood, so there was a lot of stuff that he knew, Lowell. It brought us closer, and soon we were hanging out solo. Sometimes we would go watch a movie or go to an art gallery to see an exhibition, stuff like that. I started getting excited to go to work in the morning because I knew Michael was usually the first one there, and we would talk and relate before the others would come. And I also didn't leave as early as I used to from work because I knew Michael was usually the last to leave, and we would also chat and have fun. Sometimes we would go out for breakfast in the morning before anyone came, or we would go out for dinner in the evening. I guess that was when I started falling for him. I should have known he was a liar, but he just looked too innocent. He was also just too charming for my own good. The second red flag that should have gone off in my head was the fact that his sister was supposed to marry my husband. But I overlooked that, since I thought he was already over it since he reached out to my husband to apologize. Another red flag that I should have also noticed going off in my head was the fact that he insisted on hanging out with me without my husband present. Honestly, I noticed everything, even when he flirted with me and I flirted back. But I was just so flattered that somebody actually wanted me that I didn't even notice the foolish hole I was digging myself into. That was why I didn't resist when he first kissed me. I recoiled at first and thought of my husband, but Michel convinced me that my husband would never know, and so I fell into his honeyed traps. We started having a secret affair. The mornings before everyone would come in for work that we used to talk and go out for breakfast were now times we would be intimate. Sometimes we would also wait before everyone left, before becoming intimate. We were like two stupid rabbits. Sometimes I would tell my husband I had to walk overtime at work, just so I could stay with Michael. Or sometimes while my husband was at work, I would go over to the house with Michael. I think about a week ago or something, my father-in-law fell sick. It was bad, or so they said. My husband knew that he had to fly back to South Korea because he knew that there would be a crazy power tussle in the family and company if my father-in-law, who was the current CEO, died. They didn't give us specifics about what was wrong with my father-in-law except from telling us it was bad and that he was in the hospital. My husband wanted to fly back with me, but I refused because frankly his family didn't like me. So why bother? And also, how would I keep up my affair with Michael if I was in South Korea? So I used my business as an excuse and told him I didn't trust my workers enough to leave them on their own for the time that we would be in South Korea. Of course, my husband was very disappointed, but he decided to leave me and flew back alone. I was ecstatic. Yes, I know I'm disgusting and a vile cheater. How could I be ecstatic that my husband traveled to see my ill father-in-law? But honestly, I feel like that time there was a veil hanging over my eyes. It was as if I wasn't the one doing those actions. Now I regret it, and if I could go back in time, I would not make the same mistakes either way. During that period, Michel and I started using I and my husband's house as our meeting point. We started meeting up regularly at the house since my husband was away. Of course, I called my husband regularly and asked for updates so as not to seem callous and be a caring wife. My husband said he didn't think my father-in-law's illness was as bad as they made it seem, and that he didn't think he was dying anything soon, but that he would stay for a while just to be sure. I was gladdened by that, of course. In as much as the fact that my father-in-law did not like me, he was still my husband's father, and him dying now would disorganize a lot of things. Either way, Michael and I continued using I and my husband's house as our meeting point, and because I was getting regular updates from my husband, I really did not think he was coming anything soon. Oh, how I was so wrong. Yesterday, Michael and I decided to meet up at the house, as we regularly did since my husband left. We jumped on each other as soon as we got into the house and began getting intimate. We hadn't even really gone far when I heard the door to the bedroom open and in walked my husband with a luggage in his hands. I was stunned. I never heard the front door opening or the gate or anything of that sort, so I was really, really shocked. I was so invested in being intimate with Michel and didn't even think my husband was coming today that I hadn't even thought to listen for any noises, hence why I never heard anything. Cue me rushing to cover myself with the bedsheets and Michael lazily picking his clothes and putting it on. Yes, I mean, lazily. He wasn't rushing, which would be the normal response in a situation like this. In fact, he had a stupid grin on his face. And I remember wondering why he was smiling, but I was too bothered by my husband's silence to even care. Michael put on his clothes and left. My husband was still standing by the door. He looked so surprised. It was obvious he was not expecting this at all. He was silent for a while, and then he went crazy, and I mean crazy. He started silently screaming. You know the kind of screaming where the person is obviously screaming, but there's no sound coming out from their mouth. He destroyed everything in the house, and I mean everything. All the expensive artworks, expensive items I collected, mirrors, everything went down, and then he just sat down and looked so defeated. I feel so guilty. My husband is the calmest person I know, so realizing I pushed him to this state makes me feel guilty. He has left the house now, and I do not know what to do. I am so scared I feel like my marriage is over, and I destroyed it myself. What do I do? Apart from the mayhem he evoked in the house, he did not say a word or even look at me. I honestly need your advice. Please help. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been a while. About a month to be exact. I honestly said I wasn't going to post on here again because back then when I made that post, I was honestly looking for advice and just needed someone to talk to. Either way, a lot of people have been coming to my DMs asking for updates and wanting to know what happened. So here's everything that has gone down since. First of all, my husband, or should I say ex-husband, and I are getting a divorce. No dramatics, no long story. He doesn't want to work on the marriage, doesn't want counseling, just a divorce. He feels like I've ultimately betrayed him and that there's no coming back from this. He has presented me with divorce papers to sign, and I know that I do not have a good case in court. I might not even get a settlement. First of all, we had a prenuptial agreement in place. Second of all, we do not even have any children together as we decided that we weren't ready yet, so I can't file for child support. Third, he has evidence of me cheating. Yes, I was as shocked as you are when I found out. My husband knew, and he found out through the good old-fashioned way that a lot of people have been caught through texts. He found out through my text messages, but he didn't know who I was cheating on him with, and he really wanted to find out, hence why he waited and didn't confront me. And yes, the red flags that went off in my head were right. Michael was the devil himself. Michael only got with me to destroy my marriage, and I'm not even joking or being dramatic here. He told me this himself, apparently. My husband wanted to surprise me with his presence, so he had texted Michael earlier that day and asked him if I was at the store, to which Michael had said yes, even though Michael knew that we would be at home. He had set it up so my husband would come home and meet us at home, and he had been right. My husband had come home to drop off his luggage before coming to the store to surprise me, and had met the shock of his life. As to why Michael did it, he told me he only did it because he was curious as to why my husband would pick me over his sister. Now that my husband has finally seen my true colors, he will go back to his sister. My husband had really been enraged on finding out that the person I had been cheating on him with had been his best friend, and that was why he went on such a crazy spree around the house. He said he had expected anyone but Michael. Also, because of the prenuptial agreement in place, I won't be getting much money even if I was to get a settlement. Here's why: after my husband stepped down from being heir, his main source of income became his teaching job, because my husband refused to become CEO after my father-in-law. My father-in-law wanted to cut my husband off, but my mother-in-law refused and still funded my husband. My husband also had a hefty trust fund in place, so even if my mother-in-law hadn't funded him, my husband still wouldn't have gone broke. Knowing how smart my husband is, I'm sure he has already transferred every single fund he got from his mother back to her, and also the trust fund is something he had before we got married, so I won't be getting any access to that. Then again, this is all speculation, as I honestly don't know for sure. We'll be meeting in court soon, and then I'll know. In the meantime, I guess I'm going to arm myself with a lawyer because I am no expert on legal matters. Safe to see I've ruined my entire marriage and I am solely to blame. I just wish my husband had chosen to work on our marriage instead of a divorce. I am not a saint. I have my fair share of flaws and I have done my husband wrong, but I mean, we should have sat down as adults and discussed everything and not act irrational like he did. We should have tried counseling. Did I also mention my husband has sold the store he bought for me? Yes, he did, and now I have no source of income. I'm back to square one. And do you know what hurts the most? It's the fact that I'm the only one taking the blame and the fall. Despite the fact that Michael seduced me, he's getting no blame. He has gone back to South Korea, and his life is just peachy. I'll probably go broke after this and have to pick myself up right from square one again. But Michael will get no consequence at all. I still hope that one day, though, that karma comes for him. Also, the fact that I proved my in-laws right also hurts. I know they are probably throwing a feast and telling my husband how they were right. Well, I hope someone learns from my situation and mistakes. Thanks for listening, honestly.